Did you know on this day in history, in 1521, one of the most significant events was occurring that would change the course of history? Stay tuned and I'll tell you all about it.
From moments that defined our past, to people that changed the course of history, to incidents that stand the test of time, come explore such vital historical topics in On This Day in History, brought to you by the Uncharted Past.
Well, what's happening, everybody? Welcome back to my channel, and welcome back to On This Day in History, or the Uncharted Past. I'll be doing videos, podcasts I have now live, and a website, which is quite exciting. And if you haven't done so already, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe and stuff like that. I really appreciate it. I absolutely love doing this. But yeah, folks, I know I've done on these days in history shorts, wee short videos, and also small articles. But I thought to myself, for really important on these day events or instances or persons, I know they're all important, but really, really significant ones, I thought I would do a bit more longer videos or a podcast, which was what these videos and podcasts will do, to give people a bit more detail about exactly why this is a significant event or person or incident on this day in history. So this is what I'll do for major events moving forward. But without any further ado, let's get into today's video. On April the 17th, 1521, Martin Luther, a German monk and theologian, stood before the Diet of Worms, an imperial assembly convened by Holy Roman Emperor Charles V in the city of Worms, Germany. This confrontation, where Luther was asked to recant his writings critical of the Catholic Church, marked a defining moment in the Protestant Reformation. Luther's refusal to retract his works, famously encapsulated in the declaration, "Here I stand, I can do no other," challenged the ecclesiastical and political authority of the Catholic Church and set the stage for a seismic shift in Western Christianity for centuries to come. This video and podcast explores this incident, Luther's background, its significance, the aftermath, and the enduring legacy. Well, let's get into it, folks. What was the incident at the Diet of Worms? Well, the Diet of Worms was a formal assembly of the Holy Roman Empire's princes, nobles, and ecclesiastical leaders convened to address political, religious, and administrative matters. In 1521, the Diet was dominated by the controversy surrounding Martin Luther, whose writings had ignited widespread debate about the Catholic Church's practices, particularly related to the sale of indulgences. Luther's 95 Thesis, 1517, nailed to the door of the Castle Church in Wittenberg, though this act is debated, criticized the Church's exploitation of indulgences, which promised remission of sins in exchange for payment. By 1521, Luther's ideas had spread across Europe, aided by the development of the printing press, which decimated his works in vernacular languages. His treatises, such as On the Babylon Captivity of the Church and On the Freedom of a Christian, 1520, attacked the sacramental system and papal authority, advocating salvation by faith alone and Scripture as the sole authority, sola scriptura. These ideas threatened the Church's theological and financial structures, prompting Pope Leo X to issue the Bull Exsurge Domine in 1520, demanding Luther retract his writings or face excommunication. The Diet of Worms, held from January to May 1521, was Charles V's attempt to resolve the Luther problem while balancing political pressures. The young emperor, a devout Catholic, faced a fragmented empire where German princes, resentful of papal influence, sympathized with Luther's critiques. On April the 16th, Luther arrived in Worms under a safe conduct guarantee, greeted by crowds who saw him as a champion against ecclesiastical corruption. On April the 17th, so this day in history, Luther appeared before the Diet, led by Johann Eck, not to be confused with a theologian of the same name, the official of the Archbishop of Trier. Eck presented Luther's books and asked if he would recant. Luther, unprepared for the direct challenge, requested time to consider. Granted a day, he returned the next day on April 18th and delivered a resolute response. According to primary accounts, such as I can't pronounce this word, the Acta et Res Gestae, contemporary records of the Diet, Luther acknowledged his writings, but distinguished between those on Scripture, which he would not retract unless proven wrong by Scripture or reason, and those critical of individuals, where he admitted possible harshness. His refusal to recant, grounded in conscious and biblical authority, defied the Church's demand for submission. The Diet issued the Edict of Worms on May the 25th, 1521, declaring Luther a heretic and outlaw, banning his works and calling for his arrest. However, Luther's safe conduct allowed him to leave Worms, and he was spirited away by Frederick the Wise, Elector of Saxony, to Wartburg Castle, where he began translating the Bible into German. So that was the Diet of Worms, folks, and why it was so significant at the time. But who was Martin Luther? Well, Martin Luther, born 1483 to 1546, was a complex figure. He was a monk, a theologian, professor, and reformer of ideas who reshaped Western Christianity. Born in Eisleben, Saxony, to a middle-class family, Luther was educated at the University of Erfurt, earning a master's degree in 1505. Initially pursuing law, he experienced a spiritual crisis during a thunderstorm, vowing to become a monk if spurred. He joined the Augustinian order in Erfurt, where his rigorous study of scripture and personal struggles with sin shaped his theological destiny and trajectory. As a professor at the University of Wittenberg, Luther lectured on the Bible, developing his doctrine of justification by faith alone. His encounter with the sale of indulgences, particularly through the preaching of Johann Tetzel, catalyzed the 95 Theses. Luther's early writings were reformist rather than revolutionary, though, seeking to correct abuses within the Catholic Church. However, the Church's response, excommunication and condemnation, pushed him toward a radical break with Catholic theology. Luther's personality was both his strength and liability. His eloquence, wit, and use of the vernacular made him a populist figure, but his polemical style and later writings, such as On the Jews and Their Lies, have drawn criticism for their vitriol works. At Worms, Luther's courage stemmed from his conviction that Scripture superseded human authority, a stance rooted in his theological evolution. Why was the incident at Worms so significant? Well, the Diet of Worms was a watershed moment for several reasons, as highlighted by both primary sources and modern historiography. First, it crystallized the theological divide between Luther's emerging Protestantism and Catholic orthodoxy. Luther's insistence on sola scriptura challenged the Church's claim to interpretive authority, undermining the medieval synthesis of scripture, tradition, and papal power. Primary accounts, such as Luther's own letters from Worms, reveal his awareness of the stakes. He saw himself as defending the gospel against corruption. Second, the incident had profound political implications. The Holy Roman Empire was a patchwork of semi-autonomous states, and many German princes, such as Frederick the Wise, who supported Luther to curb papal and imperial influence. The Edict of Worms, intended to suppress Luther, was unenforceable in certain regions where princes would shield him, highlighting the empire's fragmentation. The Diet thus exposed the limits of Charles V's authority, setting the stage for religious and political conflicts, including the 30 Years' War, which was to come later. Third, the event was a cultural and technological milestone. The printing press amplified Luther's voice, with over 300,000 copies of his work circulating by 1521. His appearance at Worms, widely reported in pamphlets, made him a folk hero, symbolizing resistance to authority. The incident also underscored the power of individual conscience, a concept that resonated beyond religion, influencing modern notions of personal freedom. Historiographically, scholars like Benton emphasize Luther's heroism, portraying Worms as a triumph of conscience, whilst revisionist historians such as Obermann contextualize Luther within medieval traditions, arguing his stand was less a break than a radical reinterpretation of existing ideas. Whilst on the other hand, Marxist historians like Engels view Worms as a precursor to class struggle, with Luther a bourgeoisie revolutionary. These debates underscore the incidence's multifaceted significance moving forward. What was the aftermath of the Diet of Worms? Well, it's already been mentioned a few times so far, but the immediate aftermath of the Diet was Luther's kidnapping by Frederick the Wise, who hid him in Wartburg Castle to protect him from his arrest. There, Luther translated the New Testament into German, a landmark in standardizing the German language and making scripture accessible to lay people. His translation, based on Erasmus's Greek text, embodied sola scriptura and fueled Protestant literacy. The Edict of Worms in May failed to suppress Luther's movement. Many German territories ignored the edict, and Luther's ideas spread to Switzerland, Scandinavia, and England, inspiring reformers like Zwingli and Calvin. The Catholic Church responded with the Counter-Reformation, formalised at the Council of Trent 1545 to 1563, which addressed some abuses but reaffirmed Catholic doctrine. Politically, the Diet deepened divisions in the empire. The 1520s saw peasant uprisings, such as the German Peasants' War between 1524 and 1525, partly inspired by Luther's rhetoric of spiritual equality, though he condemned the rebels. The reformation of the Schematic League, a Protestant alliance, further eroded imperial unity, culminating in religious wars. Luther's personal life also evolved. He married Katharina von Bora in 1525, modelling clerical marriage, and continued writing, though his later works grew increasingly polemical. His health declined and he died in 1546, leaving a divided Christendom. What was the legacy of this incident? Well, the legacy of Luther's stand at Worms is profound and multifaceted. Theologically, it birthed Protestantism with its emphasis on faith, scripture, and the priesthood of all believers. This shift decentralized religious authority, fostering diverse denominations and shaping modern Christianity to this day. The Catholic Church spurred by the Reformation, undertook reforms that strengthened its global mission, particularly in the Americas and in Asia. Politically, Worms accelerated the fragmentation of the Holy Roman Empire, contributing to the rise of nation states and to the concept of whose realm his religion at the Peace of Augsburg in 1555. Culturally, Luther's vernacular Bible and the printing press democratized knowledge, laying the groundwork for the Enlightenment and indeed modern individualism. However, the legacy is not without vast controversy. Luther's later anti-Semitic writings influenced Christian anti-Semitism, a topic critically examined by scholars like Obermann and Rober. Additionally, the Reformation's divisiveness led to centuries of religious conflict, as I mentioned, from the 30 Years' War to modern sectarian tensions, even within places like Northern Ireland. Historiographically, the date remains a lens for understanding the Reformation, though. Traditional narratives like Baton's 1950 celebrate Luther's courage, while revisionists such as Kolb emphasize continuity with medieval thought. Postmodern scholars like Roper explore Luther's psychological and social context, offering nuanced interpretations. The incident's enduring relevance lies in its embodiment of conviction, dissent, and the power of ideas to reshape history. And just concluding everything, folks, the date of Worms on April the 17th, 1521 was more than a confrontation between a monk and an emperor. It was a fulcrum of religious, political, and cultural transformation. Martin Luther's refusal to recant at Worms challenged the Catholic Church's authority, ignited the Protestant Reformation, and reshaped Western civilization. Drawing on primary sources such as Luther's own writings and secondary works, this video and podcast has explored the incident's context, significance, aftermath, and legacy. Luther's stand remains a testament to the enduring power of conscience and the written word, resonating in debates about faith, freedom, and authority today. So there you go, folks. This podcast and video was about on this day in history, the 17th of April, 1521, which was the date of Worms in Germany with Martin Luther. If you want to know more about this, folks, check out my website, theunchartedpast.com, or I have the article also released on X if you want to read it on there as well. But yeah, folks, stay tuned for more videos and podcasts, whether it be top 10s on this day's uncharted histories and stuff like that. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate people watching it, and I also really appreciate people listening to it on my podcast as well. But yeah, folks, I hope you found that wee video useful and podcast. And thanks very much for joining in, and I'll see you all soon.